peace, and love. Welcome to the Eat Fresh Veggies podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning into the fourth episode. I know I've been a little late in getting you all some new episodes for the podcast. I've been going through some changes lately. Right now I'm actually not currently in the van. As many of you all know, I do live in a van, but right now I'm taking a little break from it, and I'm actually like moved into my mom's house. So yeah, I've been kind of doing some self love, some self healing. But I'm back to give you guys a new episode about a subject that I feel particularly passionate about. But before we get started, I want to definitely address that the part two of the Black Woman's Health episode will be coming out soon. I really just wanted to make this episode because I don't know, I've just kind of caught a wind. Like, you know what I mean? Some, well, my mom lives in the country. She lives in the country, and there are a lot of farmers, black owned farmers, and people who like grow their own food or just have their own little like garden plots in their backyards and stuff. So I do like coming down here because I do get the ability to like have access to some of this like homegrown, straight out of the ground food. But I wanted to make this episode because since I've been back and I've been able to connect with some black farmers and able to connect with, some black like gardeners in the area. I've really been like, wow, like we really have a problem with food waste and food accessibility in this country. So what kind of sparked this episode was today, Sunday. So on, I think it was Friday, we got invited to go to this it's like wild grown, but it's also kind of like manicured. I like it. That's kind of like how some of people grow food down here. Like it's not all like this like a garden and they go in it every day and they're like picking around, or not picking around, but like watering it every day and paying special attention to it. Like some people just like throw seeds out there. People just throw seeds in like a given plot, and it'll be like a mix of different greens like kale, collard greens, mustard greens, or whatever. So after they pick from it, it's kind of like, I guess I also mentioned that it's like wild too, because there's also like food that like forageable food too. Like it's like half wild, half like, someone put the seeds down, but just like didn't maintain it. I guess you can call it an unmaintained garden. Um, but yeah, so what they do around here is they, pick all the food that they can, they sell what they can, and then they give it away to like families that they know, like they'll like pre-package it up and like give it directly to people. And then whatever they have left, which is usually tons, and I mean literally tons of food, they really just let it go to rot in the field. Like they just let it like go to rot because there's nothing else that they can do with the food. So they'll kind of like send out this call to like the surrounding area to be like, hey, if y'all want some food, come through and just like grab a trash bag and just like pick what you want. So we did that a couple days ago, and we're in this small little plot. I mean, it's like not even like a quarter of an acre plot. Like it's a really small like area. And I mean, there were radishes, turnips, mustard greens. I found some peppermint. I mean, trash bags. We filled up over 4 trash bags of, well, they call it salad greens, but like various kinds of, cooking greens and just like raw greens, like trash bags of this stuff. And it really brought me to ask, like, why are we struggling with malnourishment and food insecurity in the richest country in the world when there's so much food that is actually grown, but it's actually being thrown away or laid to rot in the field. So I really wanted this episode to be about food waste in America and the lack of accessibility to these plant-based foods. So there is kind of this idea that people who live in food insecure areas, also known as like food deserts, which for some of you all who that term may be new to you, a food desert is an area that is usually situated in a predominantly black neighborhood, where access to healthy plant-based foods is non-existent. It's easier to have, get access to, you know, I'm sure you all have been to some of these neighborhoods, like liquor stores on every corner, a lot of like fast food areas. fast food restaurants or like convenience foods. But when it comes to, and not just like a Whole Foods, but I mean, even access to like, community gardens or empty plots of land to grow food is also hindered as well. So, we have so many of these food insecurity areas or like food deserts. I'm kind of going to use both terms like in and out because they kind of mean the same thing. But, we have so many of these food insecure areas. And, some of the notion is that, oh, we just like don't have enough food in this country. That is a long justification for why capitalism has chosen to mass manufacture crops longer than football fields. I mean, like miles of manufactured, genetically modified, extremely controlled uh, farms, if you will, that usually are 9 times out of 10 using pesticides and fertilizers because there's this illusion of we don't have enough food. We have to either use chemicals to make sure that we're growing keeps growing and it won't be like eaten by pests and stuff like that. And then there's also this like just this idea that like America, the reason why people are um malnourished, are being underfed, is because America just doesn't have that much food. Like, no, that's not true. Over 1/3 of the food in America, and I argue that it's higher, especially with the pandemic going around, which we'll get to that in a second. But a third of the food that is grown in America is wasted either through being just thrown away or the inability to pick the food or actually have the hands to actually go out into the field and pick the food. So it's a combination of fields that just have so much food or overgrown food, like the field that we went to a couple of days ago, and the food just like rots in the ground. It just goes to rot, and we're talking like thousands of pounds of food. I argue tons of food, and then you also have oh, hold on. I'm sorry. I was making sure that it was still recording. um, so by the way, how are y'all liking this like live video? Like it's not live, but like a pre-recorded video. I was doing the voice thing, but I was like, I kind of want to like just start putting out like a video. So let me know how y'all feel about it. But okay, yeah, that's where I was. So, we have this combination of food just like laying to rot like in the field because there's too much of it being grown, yet we have you know people who are literally starving to death in America, or children who are malnourished or undernourished or just don't have an access to a various diet. And then of course, we have food that's really just purely thrown away. And I really challenge you, and I even challenge myself to ask, like, how much food do you throw away? Like, how much food do you really throw away? Or how much food do you know that you have the luxury to throw away because you know that you can, get it fresh? Or, strawberries is a good example. Like, strawberries, how many times have we just like left strawberries in the fridge and then we go back to get them like a week later and they're like, rotten, so we just throw them away. Like, that privilege is not gifted to a majority of not only the country but a majority of the world, the ability to waste food. And to think, I know so many of us were like, oh, we have to clear our plates, or how many times we heard, like, clear your plate because, there's people who don't have, like, food. Like, obviously that's very true. And it's just really interesting that as individual consumers, we're throwing away food. But I'm really kind of trying to drive this towards like attacking the systems that allow copious amounts of food to be thrown away, laid to rot, while hundreds of thousands of Americans are malnourished, which means they're not getting adequate nutrients and vitamins in their diet. Undernourished, which means that they're just basically not getting an accurate caloric count. They're not getting 2,000 calories a day. And then, of course, people who just, blatantly just like starve, really just don't have access to food, period. Yet, we have so much food being grown in this country that's just like laid to waste. So the answer to food insecurity, one of the answers to food insecurity, is access to food. I know there are some beautiful initiatives and there's some beautiful Black farmers and organizations that are linking black farmers to black communities, and providing the transportation to get them there, and educational courses on how they themselves can grow their own food. There's one I'm actually thinking of right now, and I'm going to put it in the description. I'm also just going to put the link right here below so you can check them out. It's called Black to Earth. It's on Instagram, and she is phenomenal. Like, she works with a lot of black farmers and connecting them with communities that need access to that food. um, so one of the answers to food insecurity is accessibility. Like, it is a false rhetoric that we do not have enough food in America to feed every single person in this country and the world. Another discussion. But just focusing in this country, like, we have more than enough food to feed every person in this country. So why? It's not done on accident. People who are being malnourished, undernourished, and are being underfed, it's not simply just because, none of this is by accident. This is all by design. So I always beg the question of, like, why? Why can't we get food, this food laying in the field? I mean, I got upwards of, like I said, I got the leafy greens, a trash bag of leafy greens, and then I also got like 30 turnips and 20 beets. I mean, copious amounts of food that I really seriously don't know what to do with. Like, I don't know what to do with this food. I'm freezing it, I'm boiling it down. I don't know what to do with it. Though I'm very grateful, I can't help but think about the people who don't have this abundance. So when it comes to food, the inaccessibility to food in the black community, there is a long history of divisive tools that have kept black people from not only growing their own food, but the resources that would be necessary to connect them to food. So on the first point, a lot of black people associate gardening with slavery. And there is this knee-jerk reaction seeing black people in a field. Um, but I think it's our responsibility, as activists and as participants in this, in the black community, to really challenge that our history did not start at slavery. We were growing our own food and having our own, not only community gardens, which really weren't community gardens. They were just, everybody just grew food as a group, and then grew food as an individuals, and then traded amongst ourselves for hundreds of thousands of years. So when it comes to those reactions of, like, oh my God, like seeing a black person in a field, like back bent over, it has such a reaction in this country. However, we have to get into the habit of asking ourselves, what were we before we were forced into human trafficking? What were we? We were farmers, we were gardeners. It was kind of just the way of life. That was how you lived, was by growing your own food. So it's a method of decolonization by growing your own food, and ridding ourselves of some of those stigmas that have been pushed and forced onto us, that, oh, black people don't do that. Of course, if you ask a lot of like older black people, they're like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to them to like grow their own food. But there are a lot of people who have like certain reactions, or some post-traumatic slave distress, that seeing or being in a field and picking your own food can have a lot of reactions. So yeah, so that's kind of like one decolonizing thing that we can do, to ask ourselves, why aren't we growing our own food? And also the second point was the systemic dismantling of connections to certain foods, from transportation to finances. And Whole Foods is an example of that. There are some neighborhoods, or there are there are some areas that have a Whole Foods that is within a 10-mile radius. But certain buses from certain neighborhoods either don't go to where, like a Whole Foods. Of course, a cost is a thing too, but just for accessibility purposes, accessibility argument, there are buses that will take you near there, but you still have to walk there. Or the access to some of these more health focused, or foods that provide, or that are organic, or possibly even locally grown, are the prices are so outrageous, it doesn't even, why even try? But like, they're just really far to get to. By the time, some people just don't live near them. So to get there, to, purchase your groceries at that extremely inflated price, and then getting back on a bus, to go back home, I mean, it can be a 3 or 4 hour affair. So there are, and of course, like, I mean, as we know, like Whole Foods and many stores like it are usually, brought up in predominantly white neighborhoods. So you have people who, have a knee jerk reaction to, growing our own food. And there's some certain stigmas that are attached to that. And B, you have just the pure, just transportation wise of getting to these foods. So, I definitely want you all to check out that, page that I was talking about, Black to Earth. She's a real good connector for Black farmers and individuals, in the Atlanta, Georgia area. But I also want you guys to really ask yourself, like, where, why aren't we growing our own food, and what are the gaps, or what are the problems that are keeping us from, the benefits of growing your own food. And I guess that's a good place to end this episode on, is why, we asked ourselves, why we don't grow our own food, and what are some of the stigmas and the processes that are handicapping us from our food. But, why eat, farm grown food anyways? And I guess I got really, I'm excited about answering this question because, for starters, it's healthier, obviously, especially if you're growing your own food without any pesticides or genetically modified materials, or you're using very minimal fertilizer or natural fertilizers. You can really ensure where your food is coming from. A lot of the food that is are bought from the United States goes through about 15 hands between the grower, the distributor, the refrigeration, and then you, the consumer. There's a give or take about 12 to 15 people that's between when your food is grown and it's picked out of the ground and when it ends up in your grocery store. But one of the benefits of growing your own food is that you're the only hands. Like, it goes through one hand from, growth, of course, people helping you, but you know what I mean? Like, it goes through a very short number of hands. And obviously it's traveling a shorter distance, so you're not losing those nutritional values, because food decays as soon as you pick it, as soon as you pull it out of the ground, like, it starts to decay. So from farm to table, obviously you're getting the highest nutritional content, and you're also having that assurity of where your food is coming from. And for me, I enjoy growing my own food because it is such a beautiful connecting experience to you, to you and your body. Like, I don't know, it's so meditative, it's so peaceful, it's so healthy for your mental health to, like, be out in that garden, playing in the dirt, growing your own food, and just the learning experience of, like, gardening. And I think that's the ultimate end off to this episode, is, we're really reconnecting with our ancestors and more of our more natural ways. When we were more connected with the earth, we were more connected to our own land, and evidently more connected to ourselves. So growing your own food, in the short run, is really healthy and delicious, and also packed with that nutritional content and that flavor. But if you're even somewhat interested in tackling systemic oppression and tackling these systems that uphold our dismantlement, then growing your own food is one way to not only tackle those corporations that are selling you food at 1,000% up cost, but it's also a way to reconnect with some of those systems that they desire to disconnect you with. And one of those systems is, growing your own food, and, reconnecting with your land and reconnecting with your surroundings. So there are a lot of spiritual benefits to growing your own food. And of course, it just tastes better, and it's fresh, and it's delicious. And there's a lot of, confidence that goes into seeing something growing to be able to, like, reap the harvest of it. So what you can do is you can start to grow your own food today. You pick up a couple of seeds. You can grow a lot of foods indoors. Peppermint, basil is a really good indoor food. carrots is a really good indoor food depending on like, your climate and your surroundings. But, you can start to grow and pick your own food. But of course, you can also check out some black owned farmers that are in the area. Especially if you're on the East Coast, there are tons of black owned farms, especially in the Atlanta, Georgia area. But even all throughout, like, especially Maryland too has a lot of black farmers. But all along the eastern seaboard, you can find tons of black farmers that are growing their food, and selling it directly to you. Um, but yeah, that was my experience, and it just got me hot. Like, I was just like, yo, we got all this food, copious amounts of food, to the point where, it's impossible for just like me to eat it. So, we're freezing it, we're canning it, we're giving it away to people. And as you can see, the cycle keeps going. When you have these mass production, these monocultures that are growing just one type of food and then mass producing it and selling it all over the world, um, the chain kind of stops with that corporation. Like, or the corporation, its vendors who are distributing and refrigerating the food, but it stops at you, and you're the last part of that cycle. But the benefits of, supporting local farmers and, supporting systems like, like the system I'm talking about of they would sell it, then they would give it away, then they would just invite anybody to just take it. The cycle it vibrates deeper into the community. So it's not just you and the corporation, it's you, the farmer, the other families that he's giving the food away from, I mean giving the food away to. And just, of course, just the openment of, after all of that is said and done, it's kind of like, this field is going to go to rot. Anybody and everybody can come and get a piece. So that community, that incentivizing of community is really strong too. When you choose to farm your own food. And, it's obviously one of the strongest answers, in my opinion, to food waste is just buying local and growing your own. So let me know what y'all think. Comment below. Hit me up on Instagram at Eat Fresh Veggies. You can check me out on Facebook. My name is Khadidra Holmes on on Facebook. Of course, subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications bell so that you can be notified of future episodes. And check out the description below to support me on GoFundMe, to support me on PayPal. I have my Patreon I'm working on right now, and I have some Eat Fresh Veggies merch that is going to be coming out soon for you. So definitely be sure to hit that notifications bell now and follow me. So I thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode 4 of the Eat Fresh Veggies podcast. Stay tuned for part 2 of the Black Women's Health episode. And yeah, thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.